Don't go home tonight. Harrison, they are preparing the furnace. Those 11 words from a homeless stranger saved my life. My son and daughter-in-law thought I was a senile old man they could dispose of to cash in my insurance. But they forgot that before I was an old man, I was a builder who knew every inch of that house. And tonight, instead of sleeping in my bed, I watched from a Motel 6 as my own flesh and blood tried to burn me alive. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on them, hit that like button and subscribe if you believe family isn't always about blood. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. My name is Harrison Caldwell. I am 70 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had a family. It was a Tuesday in November, the kind of Pennsylvania evening where the rain feels like ice water running down your neck. I had just finished my shift as a part-time security guard at the public library. It is a job I did not need for the money, but one I took to stay away from my own house. As I walked to my truck, I saw him. Tobias. He was the homeless man who sat on the bench near the entrance. He was always there, rain or shine, wrapped in an old army coat. Every day I bought him a large black coffee and gave him a $10 bill. It was my penance, maybe, or just because my late wife, Patricia, would have wanted me to. I bent down to hand him the cup. Here you go, Tobias. Stay warm, I said. Usually he just nodded or mumbled a thank you. But today was different. His hand shot out like a cobra. He grabbed my wrist. His grip was like iron. It was not the grip of a weak old man. His eyes, usually cloudy, were sharp and terrified. He pulled me closer, ignoring the hot coffee spilling on the wet pavement. Harrison, he whispered, his voice raspy but clear. Listen to me. Do not go back to 42 Oak Street tonight. Do not go home. I tried to pull away, confused and startled. Let go of me, Tobias. How do you know my address? He tightened his grip. He looked around the parking lot as if he expected to be shot. You have been kind to me, he hissed. So I am warning you. Go to a hotel. Sleep in your truck. Go anywhere but there. They are preparing the furnace. Tonight is the night. Then just as quickly as he had grabbed me, he let go and slumped back against the bench, pulling his hood over his face as if we had never spoken. I stood there for a moment, the rain soaking through my jacket. I wanted to ask him more, but he had shut down completely. I got into my Ford F-150, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I locked the doors immediately. They are preparing the furnace. The words echoed in the cab. I started the engine and drove out of the parking lot, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. 42. Oak Street. That wasn't just an address to me. That was the house I built with my own 2 hands 40 years ago. I was a general contractor back then. I laid every brick. I framed every wall. It was where Patricia and I raised our son Lucas. It was supposed to be my sanctuary, my retirement. But ever since Patricia passed away from a stroke 6 months ago, it had become my prison. At the funeral, Lucas and his wife Megan cried crocodile tears. Dad, you can't live alone in that big house, Lucas had said, putting a hand on my shoulder. We will move in. We will take care of you. It sounded like love. It was actually an invasion. Within a week, Megan had moved my things out of the master bedroom. We need the space, Harrison, she said, not even calling me Dad anymore. You will be more comfortable in the attic room. It is quieter up there. They took over the master suite. They took over the kitchen. I watched as Megan threw out Patricia's favorite curtains because she said they looked cheap. I watched Lucas park his new sports car in my garage, a car he bought with money he borrowed from me and never paid back. I, a retired contractor with $500,000 in savings and a paid-off house, was suddenly a guest in my own home. I took the security job just to avoid Megan's cold stares and Lucas's constant requests for money to cover his bad investments. I was halfway home, the windshield wipers slapping back and forth, when the logic kicked in. Tobias was just a homeless man. He was probably off his medication or confusing me with someone else. How could a man who lived on a bench know what was happening inside my walls? I told myself I was being a fool. I should go home, heat up some soup, and ignore the crazy ramblings of a stranger. I turned onto Elm Street 5 minutes from my driveway. Then it hit me. The furnace. My stomach dropped. My house had a modern HVAC system for heating and cooling. But in the basement there was an old industrial gas furnace from the 50s. I hadn't turned it on in 10 years. Patricia used to complain it smelled like rotten eggs. I knew why. The pilot light assembly was faulty, and the ventilation pipe had a hairline crack. I had capped the gas line to that unit myself years ago to make it safe. I never removed it because it was too heavy to haul out. But Lucas didn't know about the cap. He didn't know about the crack in the ventilation. He only knew it was an old furnace connected to the main gas line. If someone uncapped that line and tried to light it without fixing the vent, it wouldn't just heat the house. It would fill the rooms with carbon monoxide. Or worse, if they messed with the pressure valve, it would turn my home into a bomb. And my room. The attic room where they moved me. The ventilation shaft from that old furnace ran directly up the chimney chase right behind my bed. If that thing leaked, I would be the first to die. I wouldn't even wake up. I would just drift off into a permanent sleep. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead, colder than the rain outside. Tobias wasn't crazy. He knew. I slammed on the brakes, causing the car behind me to honk aggressively. I didn't care. I spun the steering wheel and made a U-turn right there in the middle of the road. I was not going to 42 Oak Street. Not tonight. I drove 5 miles to the interstate and pulled into the Motel 6. It was a dump, but it was safe. I paid cash for a room on the ground floor. As I sat on the lumpy mattress, staring at the peeling wallpaper, I felt a rage building inside me. My son. My own son. Was he really capable of this? I pulled out my phone. Years ago, I had installed a hidden security camera in the garage to catch package thieves. I never told Lucas or Megan it existed. They thought the old camera above the door was broken, but I had replaced the internals with a high-definition lens connected to the Wi-Fi. My hands trembled as I opened the app. The screen flickered to life. I saw the garage door, and then I saw my son. Lucas was walking into the frame. He looked pale, shaking. In his hand, he held a red gas canister. Megan walked in behind him. She looked annoyed. She slapped him lightly on the cheek. "Pull it together, Lucas," she hissed, her voice tinny but audible through the phone speaker. "It is simple. Just open the valve and splash some gasoline to start the fumes. The old man is sleeping like the dead. By tomorrow morning, we will be rich." I sat there in the motel room, frozen. I watched my son walk toward the basement door with the gasoline. They weren't just going to kill me. They were going to burn down the house I built. And I had a front row seat. I sat on the edge of the stiff motel mattress, the cheap polyester bedspread scratching against my palms. The room smelled of stale cigarette smoke masked by an overpowering lemon cleaner, a chemical scent that stung my nose. Outside, the highway hummed a constant reminder that the world was moving on while my entire life was frozen in this terrifying moment. I stared at my phone. It was an old model, the screen cracked in the corner from when I dropped it at a construction site 3 years ago. My thumbs felt too large and clumsy as I tried to navigate the apps. I was shaking. Not a little tremble, but a deep, bone-rattling shiver that had nothing to do with the drafty air conditioning unit rattling under the window. I needed to see. Tobias had warned me, but my heart, the foolish heart of a father, still wanted to believe there was a mistake. Maybe they were just talking. Maybe Lucas was just venting. I tapped the icon for the security camera app. It was a cheap system I had installed myself 2 years ago after a string of tool thefts in the neighborhood. I had hidden the camera high up in the rafters of the garage behind a stack of old paint cans. Lucas never looked up there. He never looked up at anything these days, his eyes always glued to his phone or the floor. The app took forever to load. The little circle spun and spun in the center of the black screen. Buffering. I held my breath, my chest tight. The Wi-Fi in this motel was terrible. "Come on," I whispered to the empty room. "Please work." I needed to know if I was crazy for running away or if I was a refugee from my own home. The screen flickered. The image resolved in the grainy greenish tint of night vision. The timestamp in the corner read 11:03 p.m. My garage. It looked peaceful at first. My workbench was cluttered with the birdhouses I had started building to pass the time. My old table saw covered in a tarp sat in the corner like a sleeping beast. The concrete floor was stained with oil from years of fixing my own trucks. It was a space of creation, of work, of honest labor. Then movement. My breath hitched in my throat. The side door opened. A figure stepped into the frame. It was Lucas. Even in the low-quality video, I knew his walk. It was the same shuffle he had when he was a teenager, trying to sneak in past curfew. But he wasn't a teenager anymore. He was a 38-year-old man wearing expensive sweatpants and a hoodie I had bought him for his birthday. He looked pale, his face washed out by the infrared light of the camera. He was pacing back and forth, running his hands through his hair. He looked like a trapped animal. And then I saw what he was holding. In his right hand, heavy and swinging by his side, was the red plastic gas canister. The one I kept for the lawnmower. The one I had filled just last week. I brought the phone closer to my face, squinting, praying that I was seeing it wrong. Maybe he was just getting gas for his car. Maybe he was going to mow the lawn at midnight. The lies we tell ourselves to survive are powerful things. But then the door opened again. Megan walked in. If Lucas looked scared, Megan looked like she was on a mission. She was wearing her nightgown, with a thick cardigan wrapped around her, her arms crossed over her chest. In the night vision, her eyes reflected the light glowing white like a cat's eyes in the dark. She didn't pace. She stood perfectly still, watching Lucas. I turned the volume up on my phone, pressing the speaker against my ear. The microphone on the camera was cheap, picking up the hum of the refrigerator in the garage and the wind outside, but their voices cut through the static. "I can't do it, Megan." Lucas's voice was a whine, high-pitched and trembling. "This is crazy. He's my dad." I felt a tiny spark of hope, a microscopic ember in the ash of my soul. "See," I thought, "he loves me. He can't do it." Then Megan moved. She closed the distance between them in 2 strides. She didn't hug him. She didn't comfort him. She reached out and slapped him. It wasn't a hard slap, not a violent blow, but a sharp, stinging tap on his cheek, designed to snap him to attention. It was the way one might correct a disobedient dog. "Pull yourself together," she hissed. Her voice was low, venomous. "We talked about this. We are drowning Lucas. The loan sharks called again today. Do you want them to come here? Do you want them to hurt me?" Lucas rubbed his cheek, looking down at the gas can. "But burning the house. What if he wakes up? He won't wake up." Megan said, her voice turning chillingly practical. "I crushed 3 of his sleeping pills into his tea at dinner. He drank the whole cup. He is out cold. He wouldn't wake up if a marching band went through his bedroom." I lowered the phone from my ear, staring at it in horror. The tea. I remembered the tea. She had brought it to me with a smile, saying it would help me rest. Chamomile and honey. I had thanked her. I had told her she was a good daughter. I hadn't drunk it. I had poured it down the bathroom sink because it tasted bitter, and I didn't want to hurt her feelings. That bitterness wasn't the tea leaves. It was poison. They had already tried to sedate me. The plan was already in motion. I put the phone back to my ear. Megan was still talking, her hands gesturing wildly now. "It is simple physics, Lucas. You go down to the basement. You uncap the gas line to the old furnace. You pour a trail of gasoline from the pilot light to the stairs. You light it, and you walk away. The gas explodes. The old wood catches. It looks like a tragic accident. An old man confused trying to light a pilot light in the cold. It happens all the time. But the police, Lucas stammered. The police will see a faulty furnace and a senile old man. She cut him off. And we will see $500,000 in life insurance plus the land value. We pay off the debts. We buy a condo in the city. We start over. Do you want to be poor forever, Lucas? Do you want to spend the rest of your life changing his diapers and listening to his war stories? I watched my son. I watched the boy I had taught to ride a bike. The boy I had held when he scraped his knee. The boy I had paid tuition for even when money was tight. I watched him weigh my life against a condo in the city. He looked at Megan. He looked at the gas can. He took a deep, shuddering breath. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." "No." I said it out loud in the motel room. "No, Lucas. Don't." He turned. He didn't look back at Megan. He walked toward the door that connected the garage to the mudroom. The door that led to the kitchen and then to the basement stairs. The stairs that led down to the furnace that sat directly beneath my bedroom floor. Megan watched him go, a satisfied smirk touching her lips. She checked her fingernails, bored as if she were waiting for a microwave to ding, not waiting for her husband to incinerate his father. I watched Lucas reach for the doorknob. His hand was shaking so badly, the gas can rattled against his leg. He turned the knob. He pushed the door open. The darkness of the house swallowed him. The screen on my phone showed only the empty garage and Megan standing there waiting. But in my mind, I could see him. I could see him walking through the kitchen, where we used to eat pancakes on Sunday mornings. I could see him opening the basement door. I could see him descending into the dark, carrying the fire that was meant to end me. I sat there frozen, the phone burning my hand. I was witnessing my own murder. I was a ghost watching my executioners. And the worst part wasn't the fear of death. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was already dead. The moment Lucas opened that door, Harrison Caldwell, the father, died. All that was left in this motel room was Harrison Caldwell, the witness. And the witness was angry. I didn't call the police. Not yet. If I called them now, Lucas might hear the sirens and stop. He might claim he was just moving the gas can. It would be my word against theirs. They would say I was a crazy old man, paranoid and senile, just like they planned. No. I needed to let them play this out. I needed to let them believe they had won. I stared at the screen, waiting for the flash, waiting for the smoke, waiting for the realization that the bed in the attic was empty. I waited to see what my son would do when he realized his victim had walked away. The silence in the motel room was heavy, suffocating, broken only by the tinny sound of Megan humming a tune through the phone speaker as she waited for the house to burn. 15 minutes can feel like a lifetime when you are waiting for your world to end. I sat on that motel bed, with my eyes glued to the small screen of my phone. My coffee had gone cold on the nightstand. The air conditioner hummed its monotonous tune, but I barely heard it. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears like a roaring river. I stared at the empty garage. The concrete floor was gray and still. Megan was still standing there. She had moved to the workbench and was idly picking at a loose strip of wood veneer. She checked her watch. She smoothed her hair. She looked like a woman waiting for a bus, not a woman waiting for her husband to murder his father. I found myself counting the seconds. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. I wondered what was happening inside the walls I had framed 40 years ago. Was Lucas standing at the top of the basement stairs? Was he unscrewing the cap on the gas line? I knew that old furnace better than I knew my own hands. The pilot light assembly was tricky. You had to turn the valve just right. If he opened it too wide, too fast, the gas would hiss out like a nest of snakes. It would fill the basement in minutes. The fumes would rise through the floorboards. They would seep into the attic room where a pillow was shaped under the blankets to look like a sleeping old man. I braced myself for the flash. Even though I was 5 miles away in a cheap motel, I flinched every time a truck rumbled past on the highway, thinking it was the explosion. I imagined the sound, the concussive thud that would shake the foundation, the glass blowing out of the windows, the fire eating the family photos on the mantel, the fire consuming the chair where Patricia used to knit. I waited for the sirens. I waited for the red glow to light up the night sky on the horizon. But the screen remained dark and silent. The garage remained still. Megan stopped picking at the wood. She started to tap her foot. She looked at the door leading into the house. She frowned. It was taking too long. Even she knew it. Simple physics, she had said. But murder is never simple. Then the door flew open. It banged against the wall with a force that made the camera microphone crackle. Lucas stumbled into the frame. He was not walking anymore. He was running. He looked like he had seen a ghost. His face was a mask of sheer terror, his skin the color of old ash. He was gasping for air, his chest heaving up and down. He still held the gas cap in one hand, but the red canister was gone, left behind. In the basement, or the kitchen, Megan spun around, her eyes wide. "What happened?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Did you light it? Why isn't it burning?" Lucas grabbed her shoulders, his fingers digging into her cardigan. He was shaking so hard his teeth were practically chattering. "He is not there, Megan." She stared at him. "What do you mean he is not there?" "The bed," Lucas choked out. "It is empty. I went up to check. I wanted to make sure the door was closed so the smoke would stay in. I looked at the bed. The pillows are there under the quilt. But he is gone. I touched the sheets, Megan. They are ice cold. He hasn't been there for hours." For a second there was absolute silence in the garage. I could hear the wind whistling through the cracks in the motel window. I watched the realization wash over them. The plan had failed. Not because of a technical error, but because the victim had refused to participate. Megan let out a scream of pure frustration. It was a guttural sound, an animalistic noise of rage. She spun around and kicked the red gas canister that sat by the mower, sending it skittering across the concrete floor. "Damn it," she hissed. "Where is he? Where could an old man go at 11 o'clock at night in the rain?" "I don't know," Lucas stammered. "Maybe he went for a walk. Maybe he got sick and went to the hospital. Or maybe he heard us." Megan snapped. She grabbed Lucas by the front of his shirt and pulled him close, her face inches from his. "Think, you idiot. Did he seem strange at dinner? Did he say anything?" "No," Lucas whimpered. "He just drank the tea. He said he was tired. He went upstairs." "He didn't drink the tea," she said, her eyes narrowing. "He played us. That old fool played us." "We have to undo it," Lucas said, panic rising in his voice. "The gas. I left the valve open. The house is filling up. If he comes back and turns on the light, the switch will spark and boom. Go fix it." Megan shoved him toward the door. "Go turn it off. Open the windows. Get the fans running. Get the gas can out of the kitchen. If he comes back and smells gas, we tell him the furnace malfunctioned. We tell him we smelled it and saved the house. Go now." Lucas scrambled back into the house, disappearing into the dark hallway. Megan stayed in the garage, pacing back and forth like a caged tiger. She was biting her thumbnail, looking at the driveway, then at her phone, then at the door. I watched her for a long time. I looked at the woman my son had married. I looked at the woman who had sat at my table for Thanksgiving dinners, who had accepted birthday checks from me, who had hugged me at my wife's funeral. I looked for any sign of relief that she hadn't become a murderer tonight. I looked for any sign of humanity. There was none. There was only annoyance. There was only the calculation of a predator who had missed a meal. She wasn't sorry I was alive. She was angry I wasn't dead. And in that moment, sitting on the edge of that lumpy bed, something inside me broke. But it wasn't a break that left me weak. It was the kind of break that happens when you snap a glow stick. It cracked, and then it started to shine with a cold, hard light. I didn't cry. I didn't feel the urge to weep for the son I had lost. I had already mourned him. The man who ran out of that house with the look of a failed killer was not the boy I raised. That boy was dead. That boy had died the moment he chose money over his father's life. The man on the screen was a stranger, a dangerous, desperate stranger. And you don't weep for strangers who try to burn you alive. You defend yourself. I felt a change in my chest. The heavy, suffocating grief that had weighed me down since Patricia died began to evaporate. It was replaced by a steel rod of anger. Not the hot, fiery anger that makes you scream and throw things. This was the cold, precise anger of a craftsman who sees a job done wrong and knows it must be torn down to the studs. They wanted my house. They wanted my money. They wanted my life. They thought I was a feeble old man, a burden to be discarded. They had underestimated me. They forgot that before I was an old man, I was a man who built things to last, and I knew how to demolish things that were rotten. I watched Lucas run back into the garage a few minutes later, giving Megan a thumbs up. They were safe. They thought they were safe. They thought they had just had a lucky escape from a bad situation. They had no idea that the real danger hadn't even started yet. I reached out and pressed the power button on my phone. The screen went black, cutting off the image of the two monsters in my garage. I placed the phone on the nightstand next to the cold coffee. I lay back on the pillows, staring at the water stain on the ceiling. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I wasn't going to run away. I wasn't going to call the police, not yet. That would be too easy. That would be just a legal battle. No, I needed to teach them a lesson. I needed to show them exactly who they were dealing with. I would go back. I would walk through that front door tomorrow morning. I would look them in the eyes. I would let them lie to me. I would let them think they were clever, and while they played their little game of concern and relief, I would be dismantling their lives brick by brick. I closed my eyes. For the first time in 6 months, I didn't pray for peace. I prayed for strength. I prayed for the ability to keep a straight face while I looked at the faces of my executioners. Tomorrow, the performance of a lifetime would begin. Harrison Caldwell, the victim, was gone. Harrison Caldwell, the architect of their ruin, was just waking up. The morning sun felt like an insult as I pulled my old Ford truck into the driveway of 42 Oak Street. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, the kind of autumn morning that usually made me want to sit on the porch with a cup of coffee and watch the squirrels chase each other across the lawn. But today, the house did not look like a home. It looked like a crime scene that hadn't been marked off with yellow tape yet. It looked like a tomb that had failed to close its doors. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles had turned white. I had to consciously force my fingers to uncurl one by one. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked terrible. My eyes were bloodshot from a sleepless night in the motel, and my gray stubble was thicker than usual. Good. It fit the part I had to play. I wasn't the sharp, vigilant contractor anymore. Today, I had to be the confused, fragile old man they wanted me to be. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of old upholstery and stale coffee in the cab, and stepped out. The walk up the driveway felt like walking the plank. Every step was heavy. I looked at the garage door, the same door I had watched on my phone screen just hours ago. It was closed now, hiding the secrets of the night before. I reached for my keys, but before I could even slide them into the lock, the front door flew open. It was theatrical, almost comical if it wasn't so deadly. Dad. It was Lucas. He was wearing the same clothes he had on in the video. His face was gray, and his eyes were darting around nervously, like he was expecting the police to jump out from behind the bushes. He rushed down the porch steps and grabbed me in a hug that felt desperate and suffocating. "Oh, thank God," Megan cried out, appearing in the doorway behind him. She was wearing a perfectly clean apron over her clothes, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked the part of the worried housewife to perfection. "Where have you been, Harrison? We have been out of our minds with worry." I let Lucas hold me for a second longer than comfortable. I could feel his heart racing against my chest. It wasn't the rapid beat of relief. It was the erratic thumping of panic. He smelled of sour sweat and something floral, like he had bathed in air freshener to cover up the scent of gasoline. I gently pushed him away and looked at him. I tried to find the little boy I used to take fishing. I tried to find the teenager I taught to drive. But all I saw was a stranger with shifting eyes and a weak chin. "I am sorry," I rasped, letting my voice crack a little. It was a long night. Lucas stepped back, wringing his hands. "Dad, you don't understand. You could have died. We almost all died." I looked at him, blinking slowly, feigning confusion. "What are you talking about, son?" "The furnace," Lucas said, the words tumbling out of his mouth too fast. "Last night, about 11 o'clock. Megan smelled it first. Gas. The whole house smelled like rotten eggs. It was suffocating, Dad. I ran down to the basement, and the old valve on the furnace had just blown. It was leaking everywhere. If anyone had flipped a light switch, the whole place would have gone up." He paused, waiting for my reaction. I stared at him, marveling at the lie. It was a good lie. It was plausible. It covered the smell of the gas he had poured. It explained why he was in the basement. It made them the heroes. Megan walked down the steps and took my arm, her grip firm and possessive. "We ran up to your room, Harrison. We were screaming your name. We were going to drag you out of bed to save you. But when we got there, the bed was empty. We were so scared. We thought maybe you had wandered off and gotten lost in the dark. We called your phone, but it went straight to voicemail." I looked at her. Her eyes were dry. There was no redness, no puffiness, just a cold, hard stare that dared me to contradict her. "We checked the yard," Lucas added quickly. "We checked the street. We didn't know what to do. We fixed the leak, obviously. I managed to shut the valve off, and we aired the house out all night. That is why it is so cold inside. But Dad, where were you? Why weren't you in bed?" Here it was, the moment of truth. If I told them I knew what happened, the charade would be over. They might panic. They might get violent. I wasn't ready for that. I needed time. I needed to get my ducks in a row. I slumped my shoulders, letting my posture collapse a little more. I rubbed my chest right over my heart. I didn't want to worry you," I stammered, looking down at my boots. About 8 o'clock, I started feeling this pressure, right here in my chest. It was tight, hard to breathe. I didn't want to be a burden. I know you two have so much going on. So I got in the truck and drove to that 24-hour urgent care clinic over on 4th Street. Lucas's eyes widened. "A heart attack? Did you have a heart attack?" No, I waved my hand dismissively. I got there, and the waiting room was full. I sat down in one of those uncomfortable chairs to wait my turn. It was warm in there. I must have dozed off. When I woke up, the pain was gone. It was probably just indigestion or stress. I felt foolish, so I just came home. My phone died in the car. I watched the tension leave Lucas's body. It was physical. His shoulders dropped. He let out a long breath. He believed me. He believed that his father was just a confused old man who slept in waiting rooms and didn't want to be a bother. It fit his narrative perfectly. Megan, however, narrowed her eyes slightly. She was sharper than him. She was calculating. "Indigestion," she repeated slowly. "Well, thank heavens it wasn't serious. But Harrison, you really shouldn't be driving when you feel like that. You should have told us. We are here to take care of you. Remember." The irony of her words almost made me laugh out loud. Take care of me. Like she tried to take care of me last night with a gas can and a match. I know, Megan, I said, keeping my voice meek. I am sorry, I get confused sometimes. Come inside, she said, steering me toward the door. You look exhausted. I will make you some fresh coffee. And breakfast. You need to eat. We walked into the house. The smell hit me immediately. They had opened all the windows, but the underlying scent of gasoline was still there, faint and oily, masked by an aggressive layer of lemon furniture polish and lavender room spray. It smelled like a funeral home. I walked into the kitchen. My kitchen. The kitchen where I had cooked dinner for 40 years. It felt alien now. Megan bustled around, filling the kettle, getting mugs down from the cupboard. Lucas sat at the table, his head in his hands, looking at the wood grain as if it held the answers to his failures. I sat opposite him. I looked at the dark circles under his eyes. He hadn't slept. Good. I hoped he saw me burning every time he closed his eyes. So Dad, Lucas said without looking up. The furnace. It is broken for good. I think we need to replace it. It is dangerous. I will take a look at it later, I said casually. No. Megan spun around from the counter a little too quickly. No, Harrison. You stay away from the basement. Lucas shut the gas off, but we don't want you down there. It is steep and dark. We will call a professional. We will handle it. They didn't want me to see the evidence. They didn't want me to see the cap that had been wrenched off, or the scratches on the floor where the gas can had been dragged. Fine, I said. Whatever you think is best. Megan placed a mug of coffee in front of me. Drink up. It will warm you. I looked at the black liquid. I wondered if she had put anything in it this time. Probably not. Not in broad daylight. Not when I had just claimed to have been at a clinic where there might be a record of my visit. She was smart enough to know that a dead body turning up hours after a medical scare would look suspicious. I took a sip. It was bitter, but clean. I need some sugar, I said, standing up. I will get it, Megan said, but I was already moving. I walked toward the counter where the sugar bowl usually sat. As I passed the small side table where we kept the mail, I saw it. It was a piece of paper crumpled up into a tight ball, as if someone had tried to throw it away in anger and missed the trash can. It was half hidden behind the toaster. My heart gave a little jump. I glanced at Megan. Her back was turned, she was fiddling with the stove. Lucas was still staring at the table. I reached out my hand, moving faster than a 70-year-old man should. I snatched the paper ball and shoved it deep into the pocket of my jacket. Here's the sugar, Megan said, turning around, holding the bowl. I smiled at her. Thank you, dear. I sat back down and stirred the sugar into my coffee. My hand was brushing against the crumpled paper in my pocket. It felt hot, like a burning coal. I waited. I drank the coffee slowly, making small talk about the weather, about the clinic, asking them if they had slept well. It was torture, but I endured it. After 10 minutes, I stood up. I am going to go upstairs and wash up, I said. I feel grimy. Take your time, Harrison, Megan said. We will be here. I walked up the stairs. I didn't go to the attic room. I went to the main bathroom, the one they hadn't claimed yet. I locked the door. I turned on the faucet, letting the water run loud to cover any sound. I pulled the paper out of my pocket. My fingers trembled as I smoothed it out on the marble countertop. It was wrinkled and stained with a ring of coffee, but the red letters stamped across the top were unmistakable. Final notice. It was a bank statement. But not from a regular bank. It was from a private lending firm, the kind that operates out of strip malls and charges interest rates that should be illegal. The account was in Lucas's name. I scanned the numbers. Past due amount, $25,000. Total outstanding balance, $212,000. $200,000. I stared at the number. It wasn't just bad investments. You don't lose 200 grand on bad stocks without noticing. This was gambling, or high-risk speculation. This was a hole so deep you couldn't climb out of it, you could only be buried in it. At the bottom of the page, there was a handwritten note scrawled in thick black marker. It wasn't a friendly reminder. It said simply, Friday, or else. Today was Wednesday. They had 2 days. The air left my lungs in a rush. It wasn't just greed, it was desperation. They weren't just trying to get rich, they were trying to survive. The loan sharks were coming for them, and I was the only asset they had liquid enough to cover the debt. My life insurance and the house. That was the math. My life was worth exactly $212,000 to my son. I looked at the mirror. The face staring back at me was pale and lined, but the eyes were hard. I carefully refolded the paper and put it into my wallet tucked safely behind my driver's license. Evidence. This wasn't just a suspicion anymore. This was the motive. This was the smoking gun. I turned off the faucet. The silence of the house pressed in on me. I knew they were downstairs, whispering, planning their next move. They had failed last night, but Friday was coming. Desperate people do desperate things, and they were running out of time. I unlocked the bathroom door. I had to go back down there. I had to play the part. But now I knew the clock was ticking for both of us. They had 48 hours to kill me, and I had 48 hours to destroy them first. I told Megan I was going to the hardware store to look at prices for a new furnace. It was a flimsy excuse, but she was too busy frantically texting on her phone to care. I walked out of that house feeling the weight of the crumbling financial statement in my wallet, burning a hole against my hip. I didn't go to the hardware store. I drove straight to the public library. It had started to rain again, a cold, persistent drizzle that turned the world gray. When I pulled into the parking lot, my eyes went immediately to the bench near the entrance. He was there. Tobias. He was huddled under the overhang, his army coat pulled tight around him, protecting him from the damp. To anyone else passing by, he was just a lump of discarded humanity, a piece of scenery to be ignored or pitied. But to me, he was the only person in the world who had told me the truth. I parked the truck and walked over to him. I didn't bring coffee this time. I didn't have a dollar bill ready in my hand. I wasn't coming as a benefactor. I was coming as a man seeking answers. I sat down on the wet bench right next to him. The wood was cold and hard, seeping through my jeans. Tobias didn't move at first. He kept his head down, staring at his boots, which were wrapped in plastic bags to keep out the water. "You didn't go home," he said. His voice was rough, like gravel grinding together. "No," I said, staring out at the parking lot, watching the rain hit the windshields of the cars. "I went to a motel." "You saved my life, Tobias." He finally looked up. Under the hood of his coat, his face was a map of deep lines and weathered skin, but his eyes were clear. They were a piercing blue, intelligent and alert. They were not the eyes of a man lost in madness. They were the eyes of a man who missed nothing. "Who are you?" I asked him. I turned to face him fully. "You knew about the furnace. You knew about the address. You aren't just some guy living on a bench. Who are you really?" Tobias let out a sigh that seemed to rattle in his chest. He reached into his deep pockets and pulled out a pack of cigarettes. He offered me one, but I shook my head. He lit one, shielding the flame from the wind with practiced ease. He took a long drag and exhaled the smoke mingling with the mist. "I used to be a lot of things, Harrison," he said quietly. "A husband, a father, a homeowner. But before the bottle took the last of my dignity, I was a private investigator." I stared at him, surprised, but not shocked. It made sense. The way he watched people, the way he noticed details. For 30 years, I specialized in insurance fraud. He continued looking at the glowing ember of his cigarette. "I worked for the big companies. When a warehouse burned down conveniently after a bad quarter, they sent me. When a husband fell off a boat right after doubling his policy, they sent me. I knew how to spot a liar from a mile away. I knew how to find the accelerant. I knew how to find the motive. He paused, his expression darkening. Then life happened. My daughter got sick. The insurance I spent my life protecting denied her claim. We lost everything trying to save her. Then I lost my wife to grief. Then I lost myself. Now I am just Tobias, the guy who sleeps behind the library dumpsters. He took another drag and flicked the ash away. But you never lose the instinct, Harrison. You never stop watching. It is a curse, really. Most people walk past me and they don't see me. I am invisible. I am just part of the trash. They talk on their phones. They argue with their spouses. They count their money. They do it all right in front of me because they think I am too crazy or too drunk to understand. He turned those sharp blue eyes on me. 3 days ago, your son and that woman he married sat on this very bench. My blood ran cold. Lucas and Megan here. They parked that fancy car of his over there by the hydrants, Tobias pointed with a yellowed finger. They bought sandwiches from the deli. They sat right here. I was sitting on the ground, reading a discarded newspaper. They didn't even look at me. They just started talking. What did they say? I asked, though I already knew the answer. They were arguing, Tobias said. The woman Megan, she was vicious. She was talking about numbers. $200,000 by Friday. She kept saying it over and over. Friday or else. She said you were the only asset they had left that wasn't frozen or leveraged. She called you a stubborn old goat who wouldn't die fast enough. I felt a wave of nausea. Hearing it from him was somehow worse than seeing the bank statement. It made it real in a way that paper couldn't. Lucas was crying. Tobias went on. He was scared. He kept asking if there was another way. He talked about borrowing from a friend. Megan laughed at him. She said nobody lends money to a man who owes the Russians. That is when she brought up the furnace. She laid it all out, Harrison. The broken valve, the sleeping pills, the ventilation shaft. She had researched it. She knew exactly how the airflow in your house worked. I gripped the edge of the bench. She planned it all. She is the architect. Tobias nodded. Your son is just the labor. But he agreed. That is the sad part. He sat right there, ate a turkey sandwich, and agreed to kill his father because he was too scared to face his debts. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling. I clenched them into fists. Why did you warn me? I asked. You could have stayed out of it. You could have let it happen. Tobias shrugged. You bring me coffee. You look me in the eye. You say thank you. In 5 years on the streets, you are one of 3 people who treat me like a human being. I couldn't let them turn you into Ash Harrison. I just couldn't. He reached into his coat again. He dug around past layers of old receipts and candy wrappers. He pulled out a phone. It wasn't a smartphone. It was an old flip phone taped together with duct tape, the screen scratched and cloudy. I kept this for emergencies, he said. I don't have service, but the voice recorder still works. Old habits die hard. When I heard them talking about the gas, I turned it on. I thought maybe I could take it to the police, but who listens to a homeless man? They would say I doctored it. They would say I was looking for a payout. He pressed a button on the side of the phone and held it out between us. There was a burst of static, then the sound of wind. Then Megan's voice cut through the noise, clear and undeniable. If we don't have the insurance money secured by Friday, the loan sharks aren't just going to break your legs, Lucas. They said they will take a finger for every 10,000 we are short. Do you want to lose your hands? Because I don't. The old man has lived a long life. It is mercy, really. One night of gas, and he just goes to sleep. We get the payout, we pay the Russians, and we start over. It is him or us, Lucas. Choose. Then Lucas's voice shaky and weak. Okay. Okay, Megan. We do it. Thursday night, when he is asleep. Tobias clicked the button and the recording stopped. The silence that followed was heavy. Friday, I whispered. Today is Wednesday. That leaves tomorrow night. Thursday night. That is tonight, Tobias said grimly. They missed their chance yesterday because you weren't there. But the deadline hasn't changed. The Russians don't give extensions. If they don't have the money or proof that the money is coming by Friday, they are dead. Which means you have to be dead by tomorrow morning. Tonight. They were going to try again tonight. The gas didn't work, so they would try something else. A fall down the stairs. An overdose of pills. A pillow over the face. Desperation makes people creative and sloppy. I looked at the old phone in Tobias's hand. That right there was my salvation. That was the proof that it wasn't an accident. That was conspiracy to commit murder. Can I have that? I asked him. Tobias looked at the phone, then at me. He didn't hand it over immediately. He held it tight. You can have it, he said. But you need to be careful, Harrison. These people are backed into a corner. A rat in a corner will bite. If you walk in there waving this around, they might just kill you right there and take their chances with the cops. You need to be smart. I am done being a victim, I said, my voice hardening. I am going to finish this, but I can't do it alone. Tobias studied my face. A slow smile spread across his cracked lips, showing yellowed teeth. It was a wolfish smile, the smile of a man who hadn't had a purpose in a very long time. I haven't worked a case in 15 years, he said. I miss the thrill. I miss the hunt. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet. I took out all the cash I had. It was about $400. I pressed it into his hand. This isn't charity, I said. This is a retainer. I am hiring you. Tobias looked at the money, then back at me. He straightened his spine, sitting up a little taller. He put the money in his pocket and buttoned the flap. If we are going to do this, we need to do it right, he said, his voice losing the rough edge of the streets and taking on a professional clip. We have the motive. We have the confession on tape. But we need to catch them in the act. We need them to commit to the crime one more time so there is no wiggling out of it in court. We need to trap them. How? I asked. Tobias tapped his temple. We play on their greed. Greed is a blinder. It makes people stupid. But first we need legal counsel, not a public defender. We need a shark, someone who hates bullies. I know someone, I said, remembering a name from my days in construction. Sarah Jenkins. She was a young lawyer I had done a renovation for a few years back. She was tough, smart, and she owed me a favor for fixing her roof for cost when she was just starting out. Good, Tobias said, standing up. His joints popped, but he moved with a new energy. You call her. I will get cleaned up. If I am going to be your investigator, I can't look like I sleep under a bridge. I stood up with him. The rain had stopped. The gray clouds were breaking apart. One more thing, Tobias said, his eyes gleaming. Do you still have access to that camera in your garage? Yes, I said. Good. Because tonight we are going to turn your house into a stage, and your son and his wife are going to be the stars of their own tragedy. I watched him walk toward the public restrooms, his step lighter than it had been minutes ago. He wasn't Tobias the homeless man anymore. He was Tobias the investigator, and he was back on the job. I pulled out my phone and dialed Sarah's number. It was time to set the trap. It was time to end this. I watched from the corner of the street until Lucas's flashy sports car pulled out of the driveway. Megan was in the passenger seat arguing on her phone, probably trying to buy more time with their creditors. They were gone. I had maybe an hour, probably less. I walked back to the house, my heart beating a rhythm of dread against my ribs. I felt like a burglar in my own home. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the silence. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the heavy, expectant silence of a place that holds too many secrets. I didn't go to the kitchen. I didn't go to the attic. I went straight to the master bedroom, the room that used to be mine and Patricia's, the room they had claimed for themselves the week after the funeral. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. It wasn't the scent of lavender and old paper that Patricia loved. It was the cloying smell of Megan's expensive perfume and the stale odor of Lucas's unwashed gym clothes piled in the corner. They had turned our sanctuary into a pigsty. I walked to the walk-in closet. Patricia and I had bought a heavy steel safe 20 years ago. We kept it bolted to the floor in the back of the closet behind the winter coats. We kept our birth certificates there, the deed to the house, our life insurance policies, the small velvet bag with Patricia's grandmother's diamond brooch. I pushed aside Megan's hanging dresses. The safe was there. At first glance it looked normal, but I was a contractor. I noticed details. I noticed things that didn't sit right. There were tiny metal shavings on the carpet fibers, gold dust. I knelt down, my knees cracking. I ran my thumb over the dial. It felt loose. There was a small scratch right above the keyhole, barely visible unless you were looking for it. It had been filled in with something waxy, probably shoe polish, to hide the mark. They hadn't guessed the combination. They had drilled it. Or they had hired someone to bypass it and then tried to cover their tracks. My stomach turned. They had violated the one place I thought was secure. I turned the dial to our combination anyway. Right to 10, left to 24, right to 51. The dates of our wedding. The handle turned with a smooth click. The internal mechanism had been reset, but they had kept the code, probably to avoid raising suspicion if I ever tried to open it. I pulled the heavy door open. The interior light flickered on. It looked organized. The stacks of papers were neat, but the velvet bag was gone. The brooch was gone. I knew it would be. Megan had probably pawned it months ago, but the jewelry was the least of my worries. I reached for the blue folder labeled Patricia. This was the insurance payout from her death. $300,000. We had planned to use it for my care later in life, or to help the grandkids with college. I opened the folder. It was empty. No. Not empty. There was a single bank statement at the back. It showed a series of transfers. 50,000. 100,000. 150,000. All moved to an account under the name L&M Ventures, Lucas and Megan. The dates were from 3 months ago, right after they kicked me out of the master bedroom. I flipped to the authorization forms. There it was, my signature, Harrison Caldwell. But it wasn't my hand. The loops on the H were too wide. The slant was wrong. It was a forgery. A good one, but a forgery nonetheless. They had stolen my wife's legacy. Every single cent she had left to protect me was gone. I felt a tear leak out of my eye, but I wiped it away angrily. I didn't have time for grief. I reached for the next folder. Harrison. My policy. It was a whole life policy I had paid into for 30 years. It had a cash value, but the death benefit was the real prize. $500,000. I pulled out the beneficiary designation form. The original form from 1995 listed Patricia. If she predeceased me, it was supposed to go to a trust for the grandchildren, but that page was gone. In its place was a new form dated 4 months ago. Primary beneficiary Lucas Caldwell. Relationship. Son. Contingent beneficiary Megan Caldwell. The signature at the bottom was shaky. It looked like the signature of a senile old man. They had practiced. They had practiced being me so they could profit from my death. It wasn't just about the furnace. They had been planning this for months. They had set up the financial dominoes so that the moment my heart stopped, or the moment the house exploded, the money would flow directly into their pockets. I put the folder down, my hands trembling with rage. I reached for the last document, the most important one. The deed to the house. 42 Oak Street, paid off in 1998. It was the only thing I truly owned, the only thing that was supposed to be safe. I searched the stack. I looked under the birth certificates. I looked under the old tax returns. The deed was gone. In its place was a thick document stapled together with a glossy business card clipped to the front. The card read, Apex Title Loans. Fast cash, no questions asked. I opened the document. It wasn't a mortgage. No bank would give a mortgage on a house occupied by a 70-year-old man without his consent. This was a lien, a high-interest collateral loan. They had taken the physical deed, the actual piece of paper that proved ownership, and they had given it to a shark. I scanned the terms. They had borrowed $150,000 against the house. The interest rate was predatory, 28%, and there was a clause in bold print at the bottom. Failure to repay in full by November 15th will result in immediate forfeiture of property titles. November 15th. That was tomorrow. Friday. The pieces finally clicked together. The $200,000 they owed the Russians. The $150,000 they owed the title loan company. They had leveraged everything. They had borrowed against the house to pay the gambling debts, and now the title loan was due at the same time as the sharks. They were drowning in every direction. If I died tonight, the life insurance would pay out $500,000. They would pay off the title loan to get the house back. They would pay off the Russians to save their fingers. And they would still have money left over to buy that condo in the city. I was not a father to them. I was a piggy bank that they needed to smash open to survive their own stupidity. I stared at the papers. This was the motive. This was the proof. Tobias had the recording of the intent. I had the paper trail of the desperation. Suddenly I heard a sound that made my blood freeze. The rumble of an engine. It was distinct. The low, throaty growl of Lucas's sports car. He was back. They were early. They weren't supposed to be back for hours. Panic spiked in my chest. I was sitting on the floor of their bedroom surrounded by the evidence of their crimes. If they found me here, if they saw that I knew everything, the charade would be over. They wouldn't wait for the furnace. They would push me down the stairs. They would smother me with a pillow right here on this floor. Desperate people don't negotiate. I heard the garage door opening, the mechanical whine of the chain drive vibrating through the floorboards. I scrambled. My old knees protested as I shoved the papers back into the folders. I didn't have time to organize them perfectly. I jammed Patricia's file to the back. I slid the title loan document under the tax returns. I threw the life insurance policy on top. I grabbed the heavy door of the safe. I slammed it shut. I spun the dial. 1 turn, 2 turns. I yanked the handle to make sure it was locked. It held. I stood up dizzy from the sudden movement. I smoothed the winter coats back over the safe. I backed out of the closet. I heard the door from the garage opening into the kitchen downstairs. I heard Megan's voice shrill and angry. "I told you we should have checked the account balance before we left," she was shouting. I heard Lucas's footsteps heavy on the hardwood. "Shut up, Megan, just shut up." I am thinking. They were in the kitchen. They were heading for the stairs. I looked around the room. Had I left anything? A footprint, a moved pillow? It looked okay. I moved to the bedroom door. I opened it a crack. I could hear them coming up. They were on the landing. I couldn't go down the stairs. I would run right into them. I stepped out into the hallway. The door to the attic stairs was 10 feet away, but the door to the bathroom was closer. I threw myself toward the bathroom door. I grabbed the handle and slipped inside just as Lucas turned the corner at the top of the stairs. I clicked the lock silently. I leaned against the door, holding my breath. I heard Lucas walk past. I heard him go into the master bedroom. "Where is he?" Megan asked from the hallway. Her voice was right outside the bathroom door. "Probably sleeping." Lucas grunted from the bedroom, or staring at the wall in the attic. Who cares? I turned on the faucet. I washed my hands. I splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, but my eyes were burning. I had seen the truth. I had seen the depth of their betrayal. They had sold my past to pay for their mistakes, and now they were coming for my future. I turned off the water. I unlocked the door. I opened it and stepped out into the hallway. Megan was standing there holding a laundry basket. She jumped when she saw me. "Jesus, Harrison," she snapped. "You scared me." I smiled at her. It was a weak, tired smile. The smile of a confused old man. "Sorry, Megan," I rasped. "I just needed to use the restroom. The one upstairs has a drip. It keeps me awake." She eyed me suspiciously. She looked at the bathroom door, then back at me. "Well, go take a nap," she said dismissively. "You look like death warmed over." I nodded. "I will," I said. "I will go rest." I walked past her. I climbed the narrow stairs to the attic. My sanctuary. My prison. As I lay down on the cot listening to them moving around downstairs, I knew one thing for certain. Tonight was the night. They had run out of time. The money was due tomorrow. The title loan was due tomorrow. They would come for me tonight. But I was ready. I had the team. I had the plan. And now I had the fire in my belly to burn their whole world down before they could strike a match. I drove to the downtown office of Sarah Jenkins with my heart in my throat. The last time I had seen Sarah, she was a fresh law school graduate, living in a fixer-upper that leaked every time it rained. I had reshingled her roof for the cost of materials because I knew what it was like to start with nothing. Now her office was on the 10th floor of a glass building with a view of the river. She had done well for herself. She was known as a pit bull in the courtroom, a woman who fought for the underdogs and tore bullies apart. She was exactly what I needed. When I walked into her conference room, Tobias was already there, looking uncomfortable in a suit I had bought him at a thrift store on the way over. He looked like a retired professor, not a man who slept on a bench. He had played the part of the distinguished investigator perfectly. Sarah sat at the head of the table listening to the recording on the old flip phone. Her face was pale, her jaw set tight. When the recording finished, she didn't say a word for a long minute. She just stared at the device as if it were a loaded gun. "This is conspiracy to commit murder, Harrison," she said finally, her voice low and dangerous. "We have enough here to put them away for 20 years. I can have the police at your house in an hour. We can end this right now." I shook my head. "No, Sarah, not yet." She looked at me incredulous. "Harrison, they are trying to kill you. Tonight." "You heard them. Friday is the deadline. If we don't act, they will try again. If you call the police now," I said, leaning forward, my hands clasped on the polished mahogany table. "They go to jail, yes. But the house is lost. They took a title loan against the deed, Sarah. A predatory loan. If I don't pay it off by tomorrow, the lender seizes the property. If Lucas goes to jail, the loan defaults immediately. I lose the house I built. I lose the land my wife loved. I lose everything except my life, and at my age, a life without a home isn't much of a life at all." Sarah tapped her pen on the legal pad, thinking. "So you want to save the house first?" "I want to save the house," I said, "and I want to teach them a lesson. I don't just want them in handcuffs. I want them to feel what I felt. I want them to feel the hope of a future and then have it ripped away. I want to break them, Sarah." Sarah looked at me, and for the first time she didn't see the kindly old contractor who fixed her roof. She saw a father who had been pushed too far. She nodded slowly, a small, sharp smile appearing on her face. "Okay, Harrison," she said. "We do it your way. But we need to buy time. If the deadline is tomorrow, we need to give them a reason to keep you alive past Friday. We need to give them something worth more than the insurance money. We give them greed, Tobias chimed in, his voice raspy. Greed is the only thing stronger than their fear of the Russians. We spent the next hour crafting the perfect lie. Sarah typed up a letter on thick, cream-colored stationery, using the letterhead of a fictitious law firm in Austin, Texas. It was a masterpiece of legal jargon and false promises. It spoke of a great uncle I never had. It spoke of mineral rights discovered on a barren plot of land near Odessa. It spoke of oil. $2 million, Sarah said, holding up the printed letter. That is the number. It is high enough to solve all their problems and make them rich, but not so high that it sounds like a fairy tale. It is the perfect bait, but there is a catch, I added. Right, Sarah said, typing again. The beneficiary must sign in person, in Texas, next Wednesday, and he must be of sound mind and body. If he dies before signing, the estate goes to charity. I took the letter. It felt heavy in my hand, not because of the paper, but because of the power it held. This was my shield. This was the only thing standing between me and a violent death tonight. I left Tobias at the office with instructions to start the next phase of the plan. I drove home. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. The house looked dark and foreboding. My truck tires crunched on the gravel driveway, loud in the evening silence. I walked up the steps. I took a deep breath, inhaling the cool air, trying to slow my racing heart. I had to sell this. If they sensed even a hint of deception, I was dead. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The atmosphere in the house was suffocating. It was thick with tension. Lucas was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, which was turned off. Megan was in the kitchen, aggressively chopping vegetables, her movements jerky and angry. They looked like two people waiting for the executioner, or perhaps waiting to become executioners. I walked into the living room, holding the letter. I let my hand tremble a little. I put on a look of utter bewilderment. Lucas. Megan, I called out, my voice shaking. You need to see this. I don't understand what this means. Lucas looked up, his eyes dull. What is it, Dad? He sounded exhausted, like a man who had run out of options. Megan came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked at me with open hostility. What now, Harrison? We are trying to get dinner ready. I sat down on the armchair, holding the letter out to them. This came in the mail today, I said. It was mixed in with the circulars. I almost threw it away. It is from a lawyer. In Texas. It says, well, you read it. My eyes aren't so good with the small print. Megan snatched the letter from my hand. She read the first line and her eyes narrowed. She read the second line and her posture straightened. By the time she reached the second paragraph, her mouth was slightly open. What is it? Lucas asked, standing up, sensing the shift in the room. Megan didn't answer him immediately. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide, pupils dilated. She wasn't looking at an old man anymore. She was looking at a lottery ticket. Is this real? She whispered. Harrison, did you know about a great uncle Ezekiel? I shrugged, playing the fool. I think my father mentioned an Uncle Zeke once. He went west to work on the oil rigs in the 50s. We never heard from him again. I thought he died broke. Why? What does it say? Megan handed the letter to Lucas, her hand shaking. Read it, she said. Read the amount. Lucas scanned the paper. His lips moved as he read. Mineral rights. Accumulated royalties. 2 million. He stopped. He looked up at me, then at Megan, then back at the paper. $2 million, he choked out. Dad. This says you inherited $2 million. I gasped, putting a hand to my chest. That can't be right. That is a mistake." "It is not a mistake," Megan said, her voice rising in excitement. "Look at the seal. Look at the watermarks. This is official. $2 million. Lucas, do you know what this means?" Lucas looked at her, and for a second I saw the fear of the loan sharks leave his eyes, replaced by the blinding light of greed. "It means we are rich," he whispered. "But wait," I said, pointing a shaky finger at the bottom of the page. "It says I have to go there. To Texas." "Yes," Megan said, reading over Lucas's shoulder. "You have to sign in person to claim the funds. Next Wednesday, the 16th. "Next Wednesday," I sighed, rubbing my forehead. "Oh, I don't know. That is a long trip. I am not feeling well. Maybe I should just tell them to donate it. I don't need that kind of money. I have this house, I have you two. That is enough for me." The room went deadly silent. I watched them. I watched the panic flare in Megan's eyes. If I didn't sign, they got nothing. If I died before Wednesday, they got nothing. The insurance money was $500,000. This was 4 times that amount. "No," Megan shouted, almost lunging at me. "No, Harrison, you can't do that. Think of the family. Think of your grandchildren. You can't just throw away $2 million. Lucas was nodding vigorously, sweat beading on his forehead. "She is right, Dad. You have to go. We will take you. We will drive you. It will be a nice trip, a family road trip." I looked at them. I looked at the son who had stood in my garage with a gas can 24 hours ago. I looked at the daughter-in-law who had poisoned my tea. I saw the gears turning in their heads. They were doing the math. If they killed me tonight, they got enough to pay the debts and buy a small condo. If they kept me alive until Wednesday, they got millions. They could pay the Russians double to buy more time. They could pay off the title loan. They could have it all. "But the loan sharks," I said innocently. "I heard you talking on the phone, Lucas. Something about Friday. Do we have money for that?" Lucas flinched. He looked at Megan. She stepped in smooth as a viper. "Don't worry about that, Dad," she said, her voice dripping with sudden sweetness. "It was just a small bill. We can handle it. If we show the bank this letter, they will give us an extension. They will wait if they know millions are coming." "Are you sure?" I asked. "I don't want to be a burden." "You are not a burden," Dad, Lucas said, forcing a smile that looked like a grimace. "You are family. We are going to get through this." "We are going to Texas." Megan walked over to me. She knelt down by my chair. She took my hand, the hand she had planned to leave cold and lifeless in a burning bed. "We are going to take such good care of you, Harrison," she said. "You just need to rest. You need to stay healthy until Wednesday. We can't have anything happening to you before then, can we?" I looked into her eyes. They were shining. Not with love. Not with relief, but with the cold, hard glint of avarice. She wasn't seeing me. She was seeing a signature on a check. She had forgotten her fear. She had forgotten her plan to murder me. The greed had consumed her completely, just as Tobias had predicted. "Okay," I said, patting her hand. "Okay, if you say so. I guess we are going to Texas." Megan stood up. "I am going to make a special dinner," she announced. "Steak and wine. We have to celebrate." I watched her walk into the kitchen. I watched Lucas pull out his phone, probably to call the loan sharks, and beg for a few more days, promising them a fortune. I sat back in the armchair and closed my eyes. It worked. They had taken the bait. I had bought myself a week. A week to sell the house from under them. A week to gather the evidence. A week to prepare the final blow. They thought they had won the lottery. They didn't know they had just signed their own warrant. The trap was set, and the jaws were about to snap shut. The next 5 days were a special kind of torture. Dante must have forgotten to include this circle of hell in his inferno. It was the circle where your executioners dress up as your caretakers and kill you with kindness while waiting for the check to clear. The house, which had smelled of gasoline and fear just 24 hours ago, now smelled of pot roast and fresh baking bread. Megan had transformed into a domestic goddess. She hummed while she cleaned. She fluffed my pillows. She brought me magazines and asked if the light was too bright or the room too cold. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. If I didn't know better, I would have believed them. I would have believed that the threat of the loan sharks had scared them straight, that the promise of the $2 million had reminded them of the value of family. But I knew better. I had seen the gas can. I had seen the look in their eyes when they thought I was asleep. Breakfast became a ritual of nausea. On Friday morning, Megan served me pancakes with fresh blueberries and maple syrup. The blueberries were plump and sweet, bursting in my mouth. She sat across from me, watching me chew with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Eat up, Harrison," she said, pouring me more orange juice. "You need your strength for the trip to Texas. We want you healthy." I forced the food down my throat. It felt like swallowing stones. Every bite was a reminder of their betrayal. I looked at her hands, the same hands that had slapped Lucas for hesitating to kill me, and now they were cutting my pancakes into bite-sized pieces like I was a toddler. Lucas was even worse. He had taken to hovering around me like a nervous nurse. He insisted on helping me up the stairs, even though I could walk fine. He brought me blankets when I wasn't cold. On Saturday evening, he came into the living room where I was pretending to watch television. "Dad." "Your ankles look swollen," he said, his voice thick with fake concern. "Let me rub them for you. It helps with the circulation." I wanted to kick him. I wanted to scream that I didn't want his traitorous hands touching me. But I nodded. I let him lift my feet onto the ottoman. I let him massage my ankles. I closed my eyes and imagined I was somewhere else, anywhere else. I remembered the times I had held him as a baby, rubbing his back to soothe his colic. I remembered teaching him to tie his shoes. Those memories, which used to bring me warmth, now felt like ice in my veins. The son who was rubbing my feet was calculating exactly how much those feet were worth, dead versus alive. I spent a lot of time thinking about Patricia during those days. I missed her with a physical ache. I missed her terrible cooking. Patricia wasn't a chef. She burned the toast. Her meatloaf was dry. Her coffee was too strong. But every meal she ever made me was served with love. She would sit across from me and tell me about her day, and her eyes would shine when I told her the food was delicious, even when we both knew it wasn't. Now I was eating gourmet meals prepared by a woman who wanted to dance on my grave. The contrast was heartbreaking. It made me realize that luxury without love is just empty calories. I would have given every cent of that $32 million for one more plate of Patricia's burnt toast. On Sunday afternoon, the plumbing in the kitchen sink suddenly developed a leak. It was a rhythmic dripping that drove Megan crazy. I watched her trying to fix it, banging a wrench against the pipes and cursing under her breath. "I will call a plumber," I said from my chair in the living room. "I know a guy. He is cheap and he works Sundays." Megan didn't argue. She just wanted it fixed. An hour later, a battered blue van pulled into the driveway. The side of the van read "Ace Plumbing" in peeling white letters. A man stepped out wearing blue coveralls with a tool belt slung low on his hips. He wore a cap pulled down low and thick glasses. He carried a heavy metal toolbox. It was Tobias. He looked completely different. He had shaved his beard, leaving only a neat mustache. He stood straight. He walked with purpose. If I hadn't hired him myself, I never would have recognized the homeless man from the library bench. He knocked on the door, and I let him in. "Sink is in the kitchen," I said loudly for Megan's benefit. Tobias nodded, touching the brim of his cap. "Yes, sir. I will have it fixed in a jiffy." Megan hovered for a few minutes, watching him work. Tobias was a professional. He banged the pipes. He grunted. He asked for a bucket. He played the part so well that Megan eventually got bored and went back to looking at expensive handbags on her tablet in the living room. As soon as she was gone, Tobias looked at me. He didn't speak. He reached into his toolbox and pulled out a small black device no bigger than a matchbox. He pointed to the underside of the kitchen island, the central hub of the house. I nodded. He stuck the device under the granite counter with adhesive. Then he pulled out another one. He pointed upstairs. "I can't go up there," I whispered. "They will see me." Tobias winked. "Leave it to me." He came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a rag. "Ma'am," he called out to Megan, "I need to check the pressure in the upstairs bathroom. It is all connected to the main line, just to be sure the leak won't travel." Megan sighed without looking up. "Go ahead. First door on the left." Tobias went upstairs. I heard his heavy boots on the floorboards. He was up there for 5 minutes. When he came down, he handed me an invoice. "All fixed, Mr. Caldwell," he said. "Just a loose washer." I tightened everything up. "Here's the bill. Check the warranty information on the back. It is important." I took the paper. On the back, taped flat against the paper, was a tiny wireless earbud. I paid him in cash from the money I had withdrawn. He tipped his cap again and walked out. As he drove away, I felt a surge of adrenaline. The trap was armed. That night, after a dinner of roast chicken that tasted like sawdust, I excused myself to the attic. I claimed I had a headache. Megan was all sympathy, offering me aspirin and water. I took them and dumped them in the plant pot as soon as I closed the door. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark. I put the tiny earbud into my ear. It connected automatically to the bugs Tobias had planted. The sound quality was crystal clear. It was like I was sitting in the room with them. At first there was just the sound of the TV, then the clink of wine glasses. They were drinking my expensive wine, the bottles I had been saving for a special occasion. "Can you believe the old goat ate 3 pancakes?" Lucas's voice came through the earpiece. He was laughing, a cruel, mocking sound. "He eats like a pig." "Let him eat," Megan replied. "Fatten the calf before the slaughter. We need him strong enough to sign those papers on Wednesday. After that, who cares?" There was a pause. I heard the sound of wine being poured. "So what is the plan for Thursday?" Lucas asked. "After we get back from Texas, we deposit the check. It will take a few days to clear." Megan sighed, the sound sharp in my ear. "We can't keep him here, Lucas. I am done playing nursemaid. As soon as the money is in our account, we dump him." "Dump him where?" Lucas asked. "There is a place over in the next county," Megan said. "Shady Pines. It is a state-run facility. It smells like urine and boiled cabbage. They take anyone. We drop him off, we sign the admission papers, and we forget he exists. We tell everyone his dementia got worse and we couldn't handle him at home. It is perfect." Lucas hesitated. "Isn't that a bit harsh, Megan? I mean, he is giving us $2 million. He isn't giving us anything," she snapped. "We are taking it. It is our inheritance, Lucas. We are just getting it early. And honestly, Shady Pines is the nice option." "What is the other option?" Lucas asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. Megan's voice turned cold. Ice cold. "The other option is that the excitement of the trip is too much for his heart. We still have those pills, Lucas. Maybe on Thursday night, after we are rich, he gets confused. Maybe he takes too many of his heart medications. Or maybe he accidentally drinks a cup of tea with a little something extra in it. Old men die in their sleep all the time. It would be a mercy. Then we don't have to pay for the nursing home." I sat in the dark attic, my hand gripping the iron frame of the bed so hard the metal bit into my palm. I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't afraid. I was frozen in a block of pure, absolute hatred. They weren't just greedy. They were evil. They were discussing my murder while drinking my wine in the house I built. They had moved past desperation into the realm of sociopathy. They had justified it all in their heads. I was just an obstacle, a thing to be used and discarded. Shady pines or a lethal dose. Those were my options. I took the earbud out of my ear. I couldn't listen to any more. I had heard enough. I had the recording. Tobias was recording everything on his end, too. We had them. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the street lamp casting a yellow pool of light on the pavement. My truck was parked down there. My escape pod. I reached for my phone. I dialed Tobias's number. He answered on the first ring. I heard them, I said. My voice was steady, flat, void of emotion. I know, Tobias said. I am listening too. They are monsters, Harrison. Yes, I said. They are. So what do we do? Tobias asked. Do we call the cops now? No, I said. Not yet. We stick to the plan, but we accelerate the timeline. I looked around the attic room. I looked at the few boxes of my possessions that Megan hadn't thrown away. I looked at the picture of Patricia on the nightstand. Tobias, I said. Execute phase 2. There was a pause on the line. Then I could hear the smile in Tobias's voice. You want to sell the house? I want it gone, I said. I want it sold by tomorrow. I don't care about the price. I want a cash buyer. I want the paperwork ready. When we come back from Texas, I want this house to belong to someone else. I want them to come home to a lock they can't open. Consider it done, Tobias said. I have the investor lined up. Sarah has the papers drafted. We just need your signature. I will come to her office tomorrow morning, I said. I will tell them I am going for a final checkup before the trip. Harrison, Tobias said, his voice softening. Are you sure? That is your home. You built it. It isn't a home anymore, I said, looking at the floorboards that separated me from the people plotting my death. It is just a house, and it is filled with rot. It is time to tear it down. I hung up the phone. I lay back down on the bed, but I didn't sleep. I listened to the murmurs of their voices downstairs, the clinking of glasses, the laughter of my executioners. Enjoy the wine, I thought. Enjoy the dream. Because when you wake up, the nightmare begins, and I am going to be the monster under your bed. Monday morning arrived with a sky the color of bruised iron. It was fitting. Today I was going to sever the last physical tie to my past. I came downstairs wearing my best Sunday suit. Lucas was in the kitchen drinking coffee, his leg bouncing nervously. He looked up when I entered. You look sharp, Dad, he said, his voice tight. Doctor's appointment. I reminded him, keeping my tone casual. Dr. Evans wants to make sure my heart is strong enough for the flight to Texas. I don't want any surprises. Lucas nodded vigorously. Good. That is good. We need you strong. Do you want me to drive you? No, I said quickly. You stay here. Help Megan pack. I will take the truck. It will only take an hour. I walked out the door without looking back. I didn't want to see the house. I didn't want to see the porch swing where I used to sit with Patricia. I didn't want to see the flower beds she had planted. In my mind, that house was already gone, burned to ash by the betrayal of the people inside it. I drove straight to Sarah Jenkins' office. The city was waking up, traffic humming with the mundane business of living. People were going to work, buying coffee, complaining about the weather. They had no idea that in a high-rise conference room an old man was about to detonate a nuclear bomb in his own life. Sarah was waiting for me. Tobias was there too, looking grim. And there was a third man. He was young, sharp-suited, and typed furiously on a laptop. Sarah introduced him as Michael, a representative from the Vanguard Real Estate Trust. He was a friend of hers, a man who bought distressed properties for cash. We are ready when you are, Harrison, Sarah said, pushing a stack of documents toward me. I looked at the papers. The top one read, Warranty Deed, It was the document that would transfer ownership of 42 Oak Street from Harrison Caldwell to the Vanguard Trust. Michael stopped typing and looked at me. Mr. Caldwell, I want to be clear. We are offering $600,000. That is 20% below market value. But we can close today. The wire transfer is ready. We take the property as is. We handle the eviction of any current occupants. $600,000. It was a lot of money. But for a house I had built with my own hands, it felt like a steal. But this wasn't a sale. It was an amputation. I was cutting off a gangrenous limb to save the body. I picked up the pen. My hand hovered over the signature line. For a second, I hesitated. I thought about the height marks penciled on the doorframe of the pantry, marking Lucas's growth from a toddler to a man. I thought about the loose floorboard in the hallway that squeaked when you stepped on it, a sound that used to annoy me but now felt like the heartbeat of the house. Harrison Tobias said softly, "It is just wood and brick. The home is gone." He was right. The home died with Patricia. What was left was just a structure housing two parasites. I signed. Harrison Caldwell. The ink flowed smooth and black. I signed the transfer. I signed the bill of sale. I signed the affidavit stating I was the sole owner and had the right to sell. With that signature, I made my son and his wife trespassers. They were squatting in a stranger's house, and they didn't even know it. "Done," Michael said, closing his laptop. He tapped his phone. "The transfer is initiated. You should see the funds in your account within the hour." "Now for the next step," Sarah said, sliding another folder across the table. "The trust." This was the safety net. We were taking the $600,000 from the house plus the $50,000 from Alfred, plus my entire life savings, and moving it all into an irrevocable trust. The Harrison Caldwell Freedom Trust. Sarah explained the terms as I signed. I was the sole beneficiary during my lifetime. Upon my death, the remaining assets would go to a list of charities I had chosen. A dog shelter, a food bank, the library. "And Lucas?" I asked. Sarah pointed to a specific clause. "Lucas Caldwell and Megan Caldwell are expressly disinherited. They receive nothing, not a cent, not a stick of furniture. And because it is a trust, it bypasses probate. They can't contest it. They can't sue. It is bulletproof." I signed the last page. It was done. I was liquid. I was protected. And I was homeless. "Technically, you have 30 days to vacate," Sarah said. "But Michael has agreed to execute the writ of possession immediately upon your signal. The moment you give the word, the sheriff shows up to clear the property." "Tomorrow," I said. My voice was hard. "Tomorrow is my birthday." "We will do it then." I stood up. I felt lighter. The weight of the house was gone. The fear of the loan sharks was gone. I had checkmated them, and they were still playing checkers. I drove back to Oak Street. I stopped at a gas station and bought a lottery ticket. Not because I wanted to win, but because I needed a prop. I put it in my pocket. When I walked into the house, Megan was in the living room surrounded by suitcases. She was packing as if we were going on a grand European tour, not a trip to Texas. "How was the doctor?" she asked, not looking up from folding a silk blouse. "Fit as a fiddle," I said. "He said I have the heart of a 20-year-old. "Good," she said. "We don't want you dying on the plane." I walked into the kitchen. Lucas was there staring at his phone. He looked sick. "Everything okay, son?" I asked. He jumped. Yeah, Dad. Just checking the weather in Austin. Looks hot." I poured myself a glass of water. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Tomorrow's date was circled in red. "Happy birthday, Dad," it said in Megan's handwriting. It looked like a threat. "We are going to have a little party tomorrow," Megan called out from the living room. "Just us. And I invited that lawyer friend of yours, Sarah. Since she is a notary, I thought she could witness the paperwork for the Texas trip. You know, just to be safe. I smiled into my glass. She was bringing the witness to her own execution. It was perfect. That sounds lovely, Megan, I called back. A birthday party. I can't wait. I spent the afternoon in the attic packing my own bag. But I didn't pack clothes for Texas. I packed the things I couldn't bear to lose. Patricia's photo album, my grandfather's pocket watch, the medal I won in the Army. I put them in a small duffel bag and hid it under the bed. Night fell. The house grew quiet. I lay in the dark, listening to the wind rattle the loose shingle I had been meaning to fix for months. I wouldn't have to fix it now. That was Michael's problem. I checked my bank account on my phone. The balance was staggering. $650,000 plus my savings. I was a wealthy man. But lying there in the attic of a house I no longer owned, waiting for my son to try and trick me out of a fortune that didn't exist, I felt like the poorest man on earth. But I wasn't sad. Not anymore. I was focused. I was a coiled spring. Midnight passed. The date on my phone changed. November 15th. My 71st birthday. Happy birthday, Harrison. I whispered to the darkness. Today was the day. Today the lie would end. Today the furnace would finally go cold. Today I would look my son in the eye and show him that he hadn't raised a fool. I closed my eyes, but sleep didn't come. I rehearsed my lines. I visualized the moment. I waited for the sun to rise on the ruins of my family. The birthday party was a masterclass in deception. Megan had transformed the dining room with balloons and streamers, a grotesque mockery of celebration in a house filled with such hatred. The table was set with the good china, and a large chocolate cake sat in the center, its frosting gleaming under the chandelier. Sarah Jenkins arrived right on time, looking professional, and detached her briefcase heavy with the real ammunition for the evening. Megan greeted her with a smile that was all teeth. "So glad you could make it, Ms. Jenkins," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "It means so much to Harrison to have his legal affairs in order before our big trip." Sarah just nodded, her expression unreadable. "Happy to help," she said, simply taking a seat at the far end of the table. We sat down. Lucas poured the wine, generously filling my glass to the brim. "Here is to 71 years, Dad," he said, raising his glass, "and to new beginnings." I looked at the dark red liquid. I knew Megan's playbook now. I took a small sip, just enough to wet my lips, then set the glass down. It tasted fine, but I wasn't taking any chances. I let them drink. I watched as Lucas gulped his wine down, his nerves clearly fraying. Megan sipped hers slowly, her eyes never leaving my face, like a hawk watching a field mouse. The dinner was elaborate roast beef and potatoes, but the conversation was stilted. We talked about the weather. We talked about the flight to Texas. We talked about everything except the elephant in the room, which was the fact that two people at this table were planning to murder a third. Finally, the plates were cleared. Megan brought out the cake, singing "Happy Birthday" in a voice that was slightly off-key. I blew out the candles, making a silent wish that this nightmare would end soon. "Now," Megan said, clapping her hands together, "before we cut the cake, let's get the boring stuff out of the way. Since Sarah is here, we should sign the papers for the trip." She reached under the table and pulled out a thick stack of documents. She placed them in front of me with a flourish. "What is all this?" I asked, feigning surprise at the volume of paper. "Oh, just standard stuff," Megan said, waving her hand dismissively. "Forms for the Texas lawyers, proof of identity, and a few things Lucas and I put together to help you. Since you are coming into all this money, we thought it would be best if you had some help managing it. You know, so you don't have to worry about the details." She flipped to the first page. It was a dense legal document full of fine print. "This one just says we are authorized to speak to the Texas lawyers on your behalf," she explained, pointing to a signature line. Sign here. I put on my reading glasses. I leaned in close, squinting. I pretended to read slowly, moving my finger along the lines. In reality, I was scanning for keywords. I saw them immediately. Power of attorney. Durable. Revocable trust. This wasn't just permission to talk. This was a full transfer of power. If I signed this, they could empty my bank accounts, sell my assets, and make legal decisions for me without my consent. And this one, Megan said, flipping to the next page before I could finish the first. This is just for medical emergencies. You know, in case something happens on the trip. We need to be able to talk to the doctors. I looked at the document. It was a medical power of attorney with a do not resuscitate order attached. It gave them the power to pull the plug. If I had a heart attack tonight, or if they induced one, they could legally stop the doctors from saving me. And this last one, she said, her voice tight. This transfers the deed of the house into a family trust. Just for tax purposes, Harrison. It protects the asset. The deed to the house. The house I had already sold yesterday. She was trying to steal something I didn't even own anymore. I looked up at Sarah. She was watching me, her pen poised over her notepad, ready to witness the crime. This seems like a lot, I said, my voice trembling, just the right amount. I don't know, Megan. Maybe I should read them more carefully. Oh, Harrison, don't be silly. Megan laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. Sarah is here. She looked them over, right, Sarah? It is all standard. We just want to protect you. We want to make sure the money stays in the family. She pushed the pen into my hand. Her fingers were cold. Sign, she whispered. Just sign and we can have cake. I looked at Lucas. He was staring at the table, his face pale and sweaty. He was twisting his napkin in his hands, tearing the paper to shreds. Lucas, I said softly, do you think I should sign this? He looked up. His eyes met mine. For a second, I saw the conflict. I saw the fear of the loan sharks warring with the last shred of decency he had left. Megan kicked him under the table. I saw him wince. Yes, Dad, he said, his voice hollow. You should sign. It is for the best. I looked back at the papers. The trap was sprung. They had committed. They had put the documents in front of me. They had lied about their contents. They had coerced me. It was all happening in front of a witness. I gripped the pen. I lowered the tip to the paper. I let my hand shake violently, making the pen scratch against the surface. I don't feel well, I stammered. The wine, it is making me dizzy. Sign it, Megan hissed, leaning in close, her mask of kindness slipping. Sign the damn paper, Harrison. Do it now. I looked at her. I looked at the greed distorting her features. I looked at the woman who wanted to kill me for a payout. And then I stopped shaking. I let the pen drop from my hand. It clattered onto the table, rolling across the documents. No, I said. My voice was clear. Strong. The voice of the man who built this house, not the old man living in it. Megan froze. What did you say? I said no, I repeated, pushing the papers away. I am not signing anything. Not the power of attorney, not the medical directive, and definitely not the transfer of a house that isn't mine to give. The room went dead silent. The air pressure seemed to drop. Megan stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. What do you mean? She whispered. What do you mean the house isn't yours? I stood up. I pulled the crumpled bank statement from my pocket, the one I had found in the kitchen. I threw it on the table on top of their fraudulent contracts. I mean, I know about the loan sharks, I said. I know about the $200,000. I know about the title loan. And I know about the furnace. Megan's face went white. Lucas made a sound like a wounded animal. I leaned over the table, placing my hands flat on the wood. I looked them both in the eye. There is no Uncle Ezekiel, I said. There is no oil in Texas. There is no $2 million. It was a lie. Just like your love for me was a lie. Just like this dinner is a lie. Megan stood up her chair, screeching against the floor. You old bastard, she screamed. You tricked us. I tricked you, I asked, my voice rising. You tried to burn me alive, Megan. I watched you in the garage. I heard you planning to send me to Shady Pines. I heard you talking about pills and poison. She looked at Sarah, then back at me, panic setting in. You can't prove anything, she spat. You are senile. Who is going to believe you? Sarah stood up then. She opened her briefcase. She didn't say a word. She just took out a laptop and set it on the table. She turned the screen toward them. She pressed play. The video from the garage filled the screen. The green night vision. Lucas with the gas can. Megan slapping him. The audio was tinny, but every word was intelligible. It is simple physics, Lucas. One night of gas and he just goes to sleep. Megan stared at the screen, horror dawning on her face. Lucas put his head in his hands and started to sob. This is what we call evidence, Sarah said, her voice calm and professional. Admissible in court, along with the recordings from the bugs in the kitchen and the living room. We have everything, Megan. Every word, every threat, every plan. Megan looked around the room like a trapped rat looking for an exit. Her eyes landed on the papers on the table. The power of attorney. If she could just get me to sign. She lunged. She didn't go for the door. She went for me. She grabbed the pen and tried to jam it into my hand. Sign it, she shrieked. Her face twisted into a mask of madness. Sign it, you old fool. We need that money. They are going to kill us. Sign it. I grabbed her wrist. I didn't used to be weak. I worked with steel and stone for 40 years. My grip was still strong. I twisted her arm away, pushing her back. It is over, Megan, I said. Then the front door opened. It wasn't the police, not yet. It was Tobias. He walked in wearing his suit, looking every inch the distinguished gentleman. He held a folder in his hand. He walked up to the table and placed the folder next to the laptop. Mr. Caldwell, he said, nodding to me. The sheriff is outside. He is waiting for your signal. Lucas looked up and his face wet with tears. Dad, please. We were desperate. We didn't mean it. Didn't mean it, I asked, looking at my son with pity and disgust. You walked into that basement with a can of gasoline, Lucas. You were going to burn your mother's house down with me inside it. You meant every bit of it. I looked at Megan. She was rubbing her wrist, breathing hard, her eyes darting between me, Sarah, and Tobias. You have two choices, I said. You can walk out that door right now with the sheriff and face charges for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted arson, and elder abuse. Sarah says it is 20 years minimum. Or Megan asked, her voice trembling. Or I continued. You leave. Right now. You leave this state. You never contact me again. You figure out your own mess with the Russians. You disappear. Megan looked at Lucas. Then she looked at the door. She didn't hesitate. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She ran. She bolted for the door, leaving her husband sobbing at the table. She didn't care about him. She didn't care about the house. She just wanted to survive. Lucas looked at the empty doorway where his wife had just vanished. Then he looked at me. Dad, he whispered, help me. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had traded my life for a condo. I can't help you, son, I said. You made your choice. The house is sold. The new owners take possession in 1 hour. You have 60 minutes to pack your things and get out. Lucas stared at me, stunned. Sold. Sold, I said. To a trust. You get nothing. The insurance is changed. The will is changed. You are on your own, Lucas. I turned my back on him. I walked over to Tobias and shook his hand. I walked over to Sarah and nodded. Behind me, I heard the sound of my son weeping. It was a sad sound, but it wasn't as sad as the sound of a furnace lighting in the dark. I walked out onto the porch. The cool night air hit my face. I looked up at the stars. "Happy birthday, Harrison," I whispered. "You made it. You survived." And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly alive. The blue and red strobe lights of the police cruisers cut through the dining room window, painting the walls in a chaotic rhythm of violence. I stood on the porch and watched them swarm up the driveway. Sarah had made the call, but the evidence Tobias had compiled made their job easy. They didn't knock. They stormed in with weapons drawn, the authority of the law finally crashing down on the house of cards Megan and Lucas had built. I walked back inside behind the officers. I wanted to see it. I needed to see it. Megan was still on the floor amidst the torn papers. When the first officer grabbed her arm, she screamed. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was a scream of entitlement. "Get your hands off me," she shrieked, thrashing against the hold. "I didn't do anything. That old man is crazy. He is senile. He is making it all up." Sarah Jenkins stepped forward. She handed a thumb drive to the lead detective. "Here is the video evidence of the conspiracy to commit murder," she said, her voice cutting through Megan's hysterics, "along with the audio recordings of the planning and the forged insurance documents found in the safe." The detective looked at Megan. "Ma'am, you are under arrest for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent." Megan's face crumpled. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a sudden, terrifying realization. "Harrison," she pleaded, the fight draining out of her. "Harrison, tell them. We are family. You can't let them take me." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had poisoned my tea. I looked at the woman who had slapped my son for hesitating to kill me. "I don't have a family," I said coldly. "My wife died 6 months ago. You are just the stranger who broke into my house." They dragged her out. She was kicking and screaming, cursing my name, cursing Lucas, cursing the world for not giving her what she thought she deserved. I watched her go and I felt nothing. No pity, no satisfaction. Just a quiet relief like the silence that comes after a storm. Then there was Lucas. He wasn't arrested. Not yet. He was kneeling on the floor near the table, his head bowed, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The police had focused on Megan, the ringleader, but they were eyeing him suspiciously. I signaled the detective. "Give me a moment with him," I said. The officer nodded and stepped back, giving us a circle of privacy in the wrecked dining room. I looked down at my son. He looked small. He looked like the child who used to hide behind my leg when it thundered. But he wasn't a child. He was a man who had made a series of catastrophic choices. "Lucas," I said. He looked up. His face was swollen and red, a map of misery. "Dad," he whispered. "I am so sorry. I didn't want to. She made me." "Stop," I said, my voice sharp. "Stop blaming her. You picked up the gas can, Lucas. You walked to the basement. You forged the signature. You were weak, and your weakness nearly killed me." He grabbed the hem of my jacket. "Please, Dad. Help me. The Russians. If I don't pay them." I pulled my jacket from his grip. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled loan shark notice. I dropped it on the floor in front of him. "I am not going to press charges against you for the attempted murder," I said. Lucas's head snapped up, hope flaring in his eyes. You aren't." "No," I said, "because at the very last second you stopped. You stopped the pen. That tiny shred of humanity is the only reason you aren't in handcuffs right now next to your wife." "Thank you," he sobbed, reaching for me again. "Thank you, Dad. I knew you would save me." I stepped back. "I am not saving you, Lucas. I am just not sending you to prison for murder. But the fraud, the forgery on your mother's insurance, that is a federal crime, and the police have the evidence. You will have to answer for that on your own." His face fell, but the money. Okay, the debts. I leaned down close to his face. "I am not paying your debts, Lucas. Not a cent. You dug this hole. You filled it with snakes. Now you have to live in it." I stood up and looked around the room. The house felt empty now, soulless. "And one more thing," I said. "This house, it belongs to the Vanguard Trust now. The new owners take possession at midnight. That gives you exactly 52 minutes to pack your clothes and get out." "Get out," Lucas stammered, looking around wildly. "But where will I go?" "I don't know," I said, turning toward the door. "And frankly, I don't care. Maybe you can find a bench at the library. I hear it is a good place to think." I walked out of the house. I walked past the police cars. I walked past the neighbors who had gathered on the sidewalk, whispering and pointing. I got into my truck and drove away. I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. There was nothing behind me worth seeing. 1 month later, the Florida sun was shining so brightly it made the asphalt shimmer. I stood in the parking lot of the RV dealership, running my hand along the side of the massive vehicle. It was a 40-foot Class A motorhome, a beast of chrome and comfort. It had a king-sized bed, a full kitchen, and a satellite dish. It was excessive. It was ridiculous. It was perfect. I climbed into the driver's seat. It smelled of new leather and freedom. I checked the dashboard. Full tank of gas. GPS programmed. Bank account secure. The trust fund was set up, generating enough interest to keep me on the road for the rest of my life. I drove the beast out of the lot, carefully merging onto the highway. I had one stop to make before I headed for the horizon. I pulled up to the curb in front of the public library back in Pennsylvania 2 days later. It was colder up here, the winter wind starting to bite. The bench was empty. I honked the horn. It was a loud, deep sound like a ship leaving the harbor. A figure emerged from the coffee shop across the street. He was wearing a new coat, a thick wool pea coat that fit him perfectly. He carried a small duffel bag. He walked with a limp, but his head was held high. Tobias. I opened the passenger door. The pneumatic hiss was satisfying. Tobias climbed up the steps, looking around the luxurious cabin with wide eyes. "Nice rig, Harrison," he said, settling into the plush leather seat. "A bit flashy for a contractor, isn't it?" I laughed. "I earned it, Tobias." We both did. He stowed his bag and buckled his seatbelt. He looked at me, his blue eyes twinkling. "So where are we headed?" he asked. I looked at the map on the screen. The whole country was spread out before us. Mountains, deserts, oceans. No schedules, no deadlines, no people trying to kill us for insurance money. "I was thinking we go south," I said. "Maybe the Keys, maybe Arizona. Somewhere the sun shines all day." Tobias nodded, leaning back and closing his eyes. "South sounds good," he said. "My joints hate the winter, and I could use a tan." I released the parking brake. The engine rumbled a low, powerful purr. I put the RV in gear. "Ready, partner?" I asked. Tobias opened one eye and grinned. "Drive, Harrison." "Just drive." I pulled away from the curb. I watched the library disappear in the side mirror. I watched the town of Willow Creek fade into the distance. I thought about Lucas probably working off his debt in some kitchen or sitting in a cell. I thought about Megan awaiting trial. I thought about the house on Oak Street, now just a line item in a trust portfolio. They were ghosts, shadows of a life that no longer existed. I looked at the road ahead. It was wide and open. I looked at the man sitting next to me, a stranger who had become a brother. For the first time in 71 years, I didn't know where I was going to sleep tonight. And for the first time in 71 years, I didn't care. I was free. I pressed the gas pedal, and we drove toward the sun, leaving the darkness behind us forever. This journey taught me that blood does not define family. Loyalty and love do. I spent 40 years building a home for people who saw me as nothing more than a paycheck. But a simple act of kindness toward a stranger on a bench saved my life. True wealth isn't the money in the bank. It is the integrity you keep when the world tries to break you. Never apologize